Welcome back to the channel. This is Roberto with Full Curl Precision. Ah, man, it's been a long day. Yeah, I know I typically do these videos pretty late at night, but anyway. So we're still growing in our subscriptions, and I appreciate it. Let's try to keep this going. We want to be able to make this channel grow. We like to do education, obviously talk about the load development, cartridge development, rifling development, but we also like to talk about uh, some of the older cartridges, ones that don't get the amount of love that they really should. And what's interesting is there's a cartridge that doesn't get near the amount of love that it honestly should, and probably because it was rare that it was ever offered in a bolt action. This cartridge was mainly offered in lever guns, and it was started by a company called Savage. The Model 99 Savage, synonymous with the 300 Savage. Basically, a 308 before it was cool. And that sums it up. So I decided to put some numbers through here, stick with the pressure numbers that they would have had for back then. In common weights, a very common weight for back then was a 150 grain bullet, and a very common type of bullet you would have found is something like a Remington Corlock. So they actually use these bullets, and you can still find them. The Savage Model 99 was a really, really unique and really cool lever gun, way ahead of its time. So the reason it's called the Model 99 is because it was created in 1899. And it did several cartridges really well. It did the 300 Savage. It also did the 250 3000, also known as the 250 Savage. That was actually the first cartridge to ever hit 3,000 feet per second. Notably, these lever guns were actually offered with not only 24-inch but also 26-inch barrels. Now, why were these rifles so far ahead of their time? Well, I'm trying to think of an equivalent today that would be semi close to a Savage Model 99, and the closest I could come up with is a Browning BLR, so Browning lever gun. Browning lever rifle, so the BLR. And so you have a lever that's operating, obviously, just like any other lever gun, right? But you have a magazine on the bottom of the Brownings, so you can single stack your cartridge. So one just like a box magazine, right? Just think of that, but just single stack, right? And that's what it is. But Savage had something even cooler. They had a rotary magazine inside. So they had this brass magazine holder, and you'd load one top down, and then you'd load the next one down, and it would rotate around inside the action. On the outside, because they only made it where it was ejecting off to the right, there was a counter that you could see on the outside. So the amazing part about all of that was you could load 6 in the magazine and then 1 in the chamber. So the gun held 7. But if you, let's say you went and you were shooting and you happened to have 2 or 3 shots and you kind of lost track of yourself, you could look at the side of your rifle and go, oh, I have this many shots left. That was actually one of the coolest features and so far ahead of its time. My brother had one, and I'm going to tell you right now, that was a wonderful rifle to shoot. Very accurate, did the job. Just a fun gun all the way around. So what was so special about the 300 Savage as a case? Well, unlike every other cartridge that was designed for a lever gun, this one didn't have to have a brunt nose. So you had the 30-30 Winchester and you had the 32 Special, and you had a handful of other cartridges, whether they were straight wall or slightly tapered. But they had to have a blunt nose because they were tube feed. So if they had that sharp point on the end, when you racked around, because of the spring pressure pushing them back, and this has been verified through tests, it will set off the primers, therefore creating basically a whole chain reaction of the cartridges in the tube to fire simultaneously. Yeah, can anyone guess where that's going to go? Either to the hospital or the morgue. And so that's why the vast majority of lever guns like Marlins, Winchesters, Henrys, Cimarrons, just name it. They were all using tube feed, so therefore the ammo and the chambering options were only for these blunt nose bullets. That's why the 30-30 is the way it is. So a round soft nose basically covers over the entire primer and sits on the brass, or a hollow point that's flat. Same thing. That's the concept. Hornady fixed that a little bit with the Hornady Lever Revolution bullets with the FTX with the rubber tip. And yeah, those make a big difference. But the thing about this was you didn't have to do any of that. So whatever 30 cal bullet was available for the 30-06, if it was, let's say, a 150 or a 160 grain bullet and it had that sharper point, you could load it in this and then just run it through your rifle. Because you never had to worry about a tube feed, because tube feed wasn't a thing with the Savage Model 99. It was way ahead of its time. I'm going to turn the camera around. We'll show you some data, and we'll go through it. So here it is, the 300 Savage. Now, again, fairly low pressure, 52.9. But again, you're talking, early 1900s. This isn't... smokeless powders were hardly even invented then. They were, but they weren't very big. So it's not a massive cartridge, but if you sit this next to a 308, it's actually very similar, but this actually has better shouldering. If you notice, if you hold this up against a 308, you're going to notice that this has a sharper shoulder. So Savage was way ahead of its time. They were doing much sharper shoulder angle as opposed to the 30-06 with a 17-degree shoulder. I can't remember what this was. I want to say it's 30 degrees. So it was actually way ahead of its time. They utilized every bit of that case. But here's a common powder that is used now, Hodgdon H4895. And again, I'm just utilizing what's available, the information I have. But at the same time, this would be a common type of bullet you could find, and you can still find these in ammo offerings. Remington Still Chambers still creates ammo for the 300 Savage, and the 150 grain Core-Lokt would be an option. And so there it is. Again, as per always, I like to push it to red line. Again, common barrel length, and you can look it up. They did indeed use a 26-inch barrel on a lever gun. This is actually phenomenal for that time frame. So you imagine, here it is, early 1900s, and you're getting 2854 to 2860 feet per second. This would easily be a 300-yard rifle. Absolutely. You could take this hunting, closer woods, and look at that. You got a 91%, almost 92% load ratio, so you still got pretty good load ratio, and 100% burnt propellant. So you have all these factors. This was the 308 before the 308 was cool. So for the guys who are like, oh yeah, well the 308 is so much better. Yeah, marginally. It's marginally better. It works better in... So the reason why the 308 is better is not because of the case design itself. That had to do more with the rifles that it was available in. You see, the 300 Savage rarely ever made it into a bolt gun. And lever guns back then just weren't all that strong. That's not a lie. They just weren't that strong. So, what did they really have in sort of a comparison with? More the 30-30 and the 32 Special. And if you look at the performance of a 30-30 compared to that of the 300 Savage, it's not close. It is not close. Because just because of the case design, the 300 Savage was doing much more with it. And again, that's also part of why they kept the loads with the 30-30 and 32 Special kind of soft, was again because you're dealing with a tubular magazine. They're trying to minimize the shock to the cartridges to keep them from exploding in the magazine. That's what they were trying to do. Where that wasn't an issue with something like this. Or if you had a Browning lever gun, it wasn't going to be an issue because you're talking about single stack as opposed to tubular. This is a great cartridge from history. And I'm going to tell you right now that if you're looking for something that's classic, that you can have a lot of fun with, load, that still be fairly affordable to load, you should really give this a look. It's still not that uncommon to find a 300 Savage in the Savage model 1899 lever gun. For reasonably priced, they might be a little on the rough side, but it's not that hard to find them and refurbish them. So there it is. That's what we have for tonight. That's a historical cartridge, the 300 Savage, in a historical rifle, and it is arguably one of the most popular deer hunting cartridges and deer hunting rifles to ever hit the market. And honestly, if Savage were to reintroduce that today, you better believe I'd be buying it. It was a great cartridge, great design. This would be a fun one, especially if you're not shooting past 200 yards. You'd never have to worry about it. But I know guys that still back east in New York State, part of, down in New Jersey, they still hunt with these. And they still get their deer every year. So I can't argue with the results. It's an effective cartridge even today. Is it as popular? Of course not. But can I argue its effectiveness? Absolutely not. The one guy I know, he's had it. His grandfather was the one who bought it brand new. And he says, according to his grandmother, because his grandfather bought it, and then his father inherited it, and now he has it. According to his grandmother, who's still alive, the grandfather used to kill between 5 and 6 deer a year with it, and he had it for 50 years. How's that for a little perspective? So yeah, can we argue the effectiveness of it? No, because obviously they filled their freezers and their family had it. So, and even today, that rifle being little over 100 years old, still works, still doing the trick. So there it is. So if you're looking for something classic, something unique, something different, give this a look. Do some history on this. So that's all I have for tonight. I appreciate all the support. Please like, subscribe, share, comment, and we'll talk to you again.